Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Really appreciate you coming to this season wrap-up, reflections, debrief, all of the above, just to give us some space to talk about sort of from the Heat Relief Network perspective of what this season looked like, especially based on what a lot of people told us from the surveys that we had as well. And we'll also be hearing from some partners today on some innovations and unique things that happened this season. So I'm going to get my slideshow playing and then make sure I can share my screen. This is always such a juggle. Okay, I think you all should be able to see that welcome screen.
Yep, I can see it.
Thank you.
Correct.
All right. So it's going to be a little tricky for me to see the chat while this is up. So Kelly Donnelly from the MAG team is also here with me in case there are any urgent and relevant questions. But for the most part, we're going to save that question and answer discussion portion for the very end of the presentations today. Yeah, Kelly, please feel free to interrupt me if there is anything we should address as we go. All right, welcome everyone. We have a pretty packed agenda today. I'm really excited to go over pretty much just give a basic overview of what the season looked like I said, from the network perspective. We have Arizona Faith Network. Irene is here to talk with us about the respite center model that was newly defined this year and already feels like such a large part of what we do, but have to remember this was the first year that we really defined it for everyone. We have City of Glendale here, Joanna Brace, to talk about some transportation innovations. I'll go over our survey results, and then Jessica Bell here with the health department to talk about what things might look like moving forward. Then we'll have open discussions as a group. So a few things to help contextualize us today for this brief overview. As a reminder to everyone, MAG's role in this is really to provide the interactive heat map online that people can use to locate heat relief stations and sites. We serve as a main supporting partner in the work, but we are just one among many partners that make this happen every year. Additional context, the weather this summer. We know we broke almost all of the records that we could break for heat this year. We had very high highs, we had very high lows. It was very dry. This isn't totally unexpected. We know that things have been trending hotter and drier. I am not the National Weather Service, though, so that's not really going to be the point of today's meeting, but just wanted to provide that as context, as well as the context of the heat-related death and injuries that are tracked by the Maricopa County reports on a weekly basis. As of their latest report, we are at 361 confirmed heat-related deaths with 238 under investigation. It seems like this will be a really big season for us this year in terms of heat-related death and injury. So just want to provide everyone that context to remind of the importance of this work and really how it is up to all of us to figure out how we continue to make it better every year. So then just some little season at a glance pieces for us. We have 4 sites that appear on our map. Many of you are already familiar with these, but just in case you're not, we had 96 cooling centers this year. These are indoor locations that have AC and water. We had 89 hydration stations. These are places that can be indoors or outdoors, but they provide water to people. Think of like a tent set up outside with people handing out water and maybe some other resources. We have collection sites, which are places that people can donate to, and then heat relief sites can then collect supplies from. We had 145 of those across the valley. And we had 21 respite centers. We'll talk about this respite center model a little bit later on today, but that was our new site that we added, and this is somewhere that is indoors, AC, offers water, and then also offers people the ability to rest for an uninterrupted amount of time, which was a big ask from the community based on the previous season. So we had 58 organizations in total be a part of or have heat relief sites available. And this was a total of 244 locations across the valley. So we definitely exceeded last year's number, which I believe was around 210. So it was really great to see those additional sites this year. Some other quick updates, just in terms of what made this season a little different for us. We had a lot of increased coordination with partners when it came to media, as well as making sure that we had consistency in definitions across sites to make sure everyone is talking about the same thing when they say a hydration station versus a cooling center versus a respite center. That seems like a really simple idea, which it is, but it took a lot of work because we have a ton of partners. So it's really great to have that coordination this year. We defined that new site, the Respite Center, and got it on the map. On the MAG website, we had a media toolkit. We also had a QR code circulating throughout the community that brought people right to the Heat Relief Network map, as well as our webpage. And we integrated this idea of an intake questionnaire, sort of piloted it this season, so that people who are running heat relief stations could provide those who are visiting some questions, and we could collect standardized data and start getting a better idea of who is visiting these sites. So like I said, that was much more of a pilot this year, but something we've really stepped into and started. Then media was also a really big change this year. As I'm sure a lot of you are aware, the Heat Relief Network and our region generally got a ton of media attention this year when it came to our summer. What this graph is showing is basically what media mentions of Heat Relief Network looked like. You can see it goes back to January 2022. You see that little blip for last summer of 2022. And then this summer, you see that huge spike in media mentions that we all experienced. Some added details: we had over 130 media related requests for the Heat Relief Network, over 850 media mentions. That's what this graph is showing in total. And then this was spread across over 60 different media outlets. So it was a really busy season, and a lot of eyes and attention were on the Heat Relief Network this summer. Okay, so that is just a little update from our perspective, but we are now going to talk about that respite center model. And we've got Arizona Faith Network here. I saw Reverend Katie join. Not sure if Irene is here, but Reverend Katie, if you want to take it away and just give us a little intro into what this new definition looked like this year in practice.
Yeah, thanks, Cleo. We were really already practicing a lot of these definitions and roles of respite prior to this season, but recognized that there was a real need to communicate to the community clearly the type of facility for heat relief they were entering and where and how to access those. So we redefined as a full heat relief network the difference between a cooling center and a heat relief respite center. And so the respite centers have always been the core of what Arizona Faith Network is trying to offer, where people can come in and actually lay down, rest, sleep. I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice. I've been talking too much, apparently. And also often bring in their pets, access water, food, depending upon facilities, definitely healthy snacks across the board, and often additional services to help them connect to caseworkers and other social services to begin navigating how they can get out of their current situation and onto a path towards stable housing and stable care. It was a very successful model. It's always hard to understand the full impact of it because the data, we're still finding different ways of being able to track that data and track the good versus just tracking the negative. Of not just measuring deaths, but measuring folks placed into housing and all of that. We are still getting together, and we'll have that to report out with our city partners as we move further away from the heat season. today we still have centers running because it's still hot. It's still over 100 degrees, which is really wonky to think about the end of October and it being this hot still. But overall, we operated 13 centers throughout the valley. The bulk of them were respite centers. We saw over 25,000 visits to those centers throughout Maricopa County, and the bulk of folks were experiencing homelessness. I think our finalized statistic that I saw yesterday was about 83% of folks identified themselves as experiencing homelessness, and this gave them a place to come and actually get sleep. This was critical, especially during July and August and into September when those lows were just not cooling off at night. And so folks had nowhere where they could get relief even after the sun went down. And so people were not able to access that much needed rest to restore their rest cycles and ensure health as they be, with so many places of worship opening their doors over the summer and heat season to allow this model to be accessible. I will say that it's going to be interesting. It was much more expensive than I thought in running this model, because you are essentially opening a day center for folks that are in need. And we are looking at how to kind of adjust and constantly talking about what are the boundaries between a heat relief center and a center that serves specifically to folks experiencing homelessness, because we're trying to provide heat relief, but we see this big mashup of societal issues right now where we're trying to just meet folks where they are with our amazing partners in each city. Overall, it was very, very, very successful, and we were able to gather a lot of data about what people needed to access for resources to really move into a healthier situation. I do think that the respite center is going to be critical moving forward to prevent heat-related and heat-caused deaths and illnesses. And I am excited about where we move forward in this together. If there are any specific questions, I'm happy to ask Cleo, or if we can hold that to the end. And we are still finalizing our data, and we'll be sharing that with the full Heat Relief Network on behalf of AFN once we can actually close our centers, which I think the last one's closing this Saturday.
Thank you so much, Reverend Katie, for that context. And if you have questions specifically around the respite model, either throw them in the chat, or you can save them and we'll get to them during our discussion period at the end of our presentations. Okay, then I'm going to move us to Joanna, who is from the city of Glendale and going to talk to us about some transportation innovations that they were modeling this year and what that looked like for us. So Joanna, I've got your presentation here.
All right,
just
go ahead and
move slides.
Go ahead and move on.
Okay.
Okay, so we were one of the communities that had respite centers, and what we did with our very healthy funding from Maricopa County was contract with two different partners, one of which was Arizona Faith Network, and we contracted them to actually operate the centers. So they acquired the sites, which in our case was 3 different churches in areas that they identified as having a very high need. And then the other group we contracted with was Phoenix Rescue Mission. And they had 2 important jobs, one of which was to provide case management at the centers. And the second one was to provide transportation. We had 2 drivers, one of which you see here, Bill, and 2 vans that operated all of the hours that the centers were open, and they went out to the various places where they tended to find the unsheltered, where they tended to congregate. Bill said that early on it was a little rough getting people to come in. If you can see our white van, it's not marked as anything but a white van, and so people were a little skeptical at first. But once the word got around and he started to build relationships, we had another driver, Ruben, also. Bill was an incredibly great fit because he'd been there. He'd been in that situation before, and so he knew how to talk and relate um, and just be a good listener. So they both did a great job developing relationships. But they provided water. They always carried water with them. They would go out and walk in the parks and talk to people, provide information about the centers, different things, and then very importantly, rides. They could take their pets in with them in the van. They could uh, bring a lot of their belongings. Obviously, we couldn't take a cart or anything like that, but and then bring them to the various centers. They did what they called a soft handoff. They would get out, stop the van, go in with them, and especially if they were new, introduce them to the staff and sort of be with them for a little while. But also in going in, they would talk, see if anybody needed a ride back to where they came from, the parks or whatever, and just again maintain those connections with people. If you can go to the next slide, Cleo. So in this particular chart, in the orange we received performance metrics on a bi-weekly basis, or I'm sorry, every 2 weeks. So the orange is the first half of the month, and the yellow is the second half of the month, and then green is the total for the month. So you can see May, it started off low. Of course, our visitation at the centers was relatively low in May. But as word got out and as temperatures increased, there was more and more usage of the vans. For a program total, we had over 1,600 rides to the sites. If you want to move to the next slide. And you can see here that in blue is the number of visits to the centers, and orange is the number of, actually it's the total, the bars are the total number of visits to the centers, with the orange color identifying how many of people arrived at the centers via the vans. So by far the most walked in, or they drove there or came by bus. But a healthy amount of people came by the vans, and it was about 14% total, up to 18% in June, 16% of the folks arriving. All right, next slide. One of the unexpected opportunities we found were that a lot of folks came by bicycle, or they were walking their bicycle because the tires, something was broken, or the tires were flat, or things like that. And this sort of, they would ask if we had anything or had a tool or something. And so after that, we provided repair toolkits, pumps, tire sealant, new tubes at each of the sites. And that became a pretty popular resource that they accessed. Amongst the challenges that our drivers acknowledged were that it might have been better to have some more branding so it could be more clearly identified who they were, what they were doing. But other than that, it seemed to go very, very well, and was great for outreach and just letting people know that it was there. I'm happy to take any questions or wait till the end.
Thank you, Joanna. Thank you to both Reverend Katie and Joanna for providing these presentations and just thoughts on some newer things that were happening this summer. These are by no means all of the innovations or new things that we did this summer, but just giving people who came to the meeting a little look into new things we're trying out, how we're trying to push the boundaries of what heat relief can offer, and the things we discover along the way. So just a little taste of that.
Oh, Cleo, I saw a question about the total cost, and I'm sorry, at the top of my head, I can't break down the cost of case management versus transportation. Overall for that contract, it was about $159,000. We had 39, a little less than 40,000 for the vans, mileage, gas, that kind of thing. And then the only other expense would be the drivers, which I can't break down off the top of my head right now.
Thanks for adding that context and for seeing that message in the chat.
Joanna, pardon me, Cleo. Joanna, there's also a request for your email in the chat.
I'm going to stick it in the chat right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, if we have any more questions on this transportation piece specifically, I'm going to have us wait until the end of the meeting to cover it, because next we are going to go over our heat relief network partner survey. You're going to hear me talking for a while, so I apologize for that. But want to go over with you just some of the things we found this year in this year's survey and how it differed from last year, or where it didn't. Not every single question we asked is on here. I kind of tried to pull some that might spur some discussion or be more relevant. But we had 31 responses recorded, so a little bit higher than last year. So hoping to just continue to grow that every year. We are going to start with a total number of people who were served at facilities. So I don't know if I provided this context. I can't remember now. These surveys were specifically geared to people who ran heat relief sites. So this is us collecting that information and seeing like what that actually looked like, what data they were able to collect, and how we can continue to improve in coming years. So we further defined we further broke out, I should say, the categories from last year. So before, I believe we stopped at 300 plus for the total number of people served. We expanded that out to 500 plus this year. We continue to see that the most people most respondents are showing us that they're serving the max amount of people. So last year it was majority of people serving over 300. This year is the majority of people serving over 500. Something that's a little bit different is there's a little more in that 0 to 200 category, which might be reflective of those added sites this year. And hopefully we're getting some sort of evening across the sites and a little more distribution of people who are visiting different sites. For average age, we also further broke out these categories to match the Maricopa County reports. It follows pretty much the usual trend we see, potentially a little increase in those elderly populations of 50 to 74. For providing outreach services, this was down last year. We had about 60% of respondents say that they are providing outreach services for heat relief. Last year, it was closer to 70%. So there is a change there. Of those who are doing outreach, the majority of this is happening through mobile vans. Some do events such as Project Connect or through direct phone calls. This also pretty similar to last year. Being able to accommodate individuals with mobility issues, this was up a lot from last year. So we have 95% of the partners responding that yes, they are able to make accommodations, which is really great to hear. This is something that we're hoping the network can move towards, and we're going to ask about in the submission survey, and we understand that it is something the community really needs. So it's good to see that a lot of that support is already there. So this is how your staff know when there is an excessive heat warning in effect. We saw that word of mouth increased here a little bit, but for the most part, things are looking pretty similar to last year in terms of how people are getting that information. And then informing the public that heat relief services are available. This was a fill-in response, extremely similar to last year. A lot of people advertise on their website or through social media, or are able to put signage out on their facilities, things like that. So not much change from last year there. And super important question for us on the MAG team, did you use the interactive map where all of those sites are and where you can locate them? So this last year we had about a 50-50 response here, and this year we're increasing to that 63%, saying that yes, they were using the interactive map. So that's really great to see that this continues to be a tool that the community is becoming more familiar with and using more. And furthermore, did you use our webpage, which also has a bunch of resources in it? This was a little bit less than last year, but just by about 5%. So we got 50-50 there using the webpage and the resources we have, including that media toolkit that I mentioned earlier. We have directories on our site as well that list out all the partners and their contact information and locations. They're available for people to print out on our website. So we like to ask people, how many did you actually print and hand out? For the English version, we have an average of about 100 per partner. And then for our Spanish version of the directory, an average of 80 per partner. So a little fewer last year overall, but we did see an increase in the use of the Spanish version, which is really great for us to know to continue providing that for people. And then how are people sourcing their bottled water? This looked really similar to last year too. A lot of people are having to combine, private donations and internal purchases. But we also see that there are groups that are utilizing the collection and donation sites through the network. So glad to know that those are being used internally through heat relief sites. For the number of water bottles that are passed out by our partners, this was also sort of broken out. It used to stop, I believe, at 300 plus. We doubled that to 600 plus, and we're still seeing that a lot of people are choosing the max, that 600 plus. So a lot of water being distributed. That first one is none. They had a drinking fountain. Text cut off there. So that's still in use. We are seeing that there is more of this distribution in the smaller range, which seems to match the distribution in the smaller range of people who are served too. So as I mentioned earlier, hoping to see that we're getting more of that evenness so that there aren't some sites that see everyone and some sites that are being underutilized. Collaborating with other heat relief network partners, this increased a lot this year as well, which is another amazing thing to see that the network is, everyone's leaning on each other for support and really using it as a network. So some top obstacles that an organization faced. We requested that people choose their top 3 obstacles that they faced in this season. And as you can see, there's a pretty even distribution across all of the obstacles. So some main ones that are just a hair above the others are that there are partners who don't know who to contact for help, that they lack donations, or that there's limited space for visitors. Another big one is the lack of coordination or limited staff. So we can see that all of these continue to be huge issues, and that it varies from site to site what your biggest issue is. That's, to me anyways, what this graph is saying. For other obstacles that people filled in, some were that ACs were breaking, an inability to advertise their site based on what building they were in, or an inability to provide after-hour services, which we know was a big focus of this season. Same for your top priorities for 2024. Asking people, what are your top 3 priorities moving forward for the next year? A a little more variation in this one, but there's definitely quite a few that people are wanting to focus on. So highest being expanding access to cooling centers, whether that be expanding hours or the number of cooling centers, and then increasing awareness of where locations are and what services are available. Obtaining funding for their operation, also a big priority for people. But really across the board, we can see that there are a lot of priorities and a lot of need that continues for our network. Other things that people filled in are working with other sites as a top priority, or working with the unsheltered population and figuring out that particular challenge more. And then we also ask people how the Heat Relief Network can be improved. We're constantly trying to evolve, and we really want to hear from the community about what is needed. And this year we heard that we need to continue clearly defining site expectations so that those who are visiting the sites have a better idea of what to expect when they get there. We have that providing signage and standards could be useful so that organizations don't have to do this on their own. More funding for things like snacks and supplies. We know that so many groups have to use their own funding in order to support these efforts. And any way that the network can figure out how to help sites do this would, of course, be useful. And then more respite centers, particularly in places that don't have as high of a concentration of heat relief sites, like the West Valley, we know, is a little more sparse for sites. So how can we make sure that we are getting those needed sites in the places that they need to be? All right. And so that was our, the survey. We'll take questions on it at the end or in the chat. I'm going to pass it over to Jessica Bell to talk a little bit about how the Heat Relief Network or heat relief efforts generally in our area might be further coordinating even more, looking a little bit different, evolving into this new space we're stepping into.
Perfect. Thank you, Cleo. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Cleo, for that summary that kind of segues perfectly into what I want to talk about a little bit today. So good morning, everyone. Thanks again, Cleo, for allowing me to talk today. My name is Jessica Bell. I am the new-ish Climate and Health Manager at the Maricopa County Department of Public Health, if you don't know me already. And so I just want to talk a little bit about how our department is working to help enhance the heat relief network in the next heat season and past into the future. So next slide, please. So first and foremost, and Cleo mentioned this several times as well, what we heard throughout this heat season from cooling center coordinators and other stakeholders was that coordination of the heat relief network is really needed and is high priority. So I'm happy to report that the Maricopa County Department of Public Health is hiring a county coordinator. So we have been able to fund a position, and the position is currently moving through our HR process. And so we'll share that position with our networks once that becomes available. Second, as I'm sure most of you are aware, Governor Hobbs declared a heat state of emergency for the month of July. And with that declaration came Executive Order 2023-16, which is titled Extreme Heat Planning and Preparedness. And so this executive order requires state agencies to develop an extreme heat preparedness plan by March 1st of 2024. So a pretty quick turnaround on that plan. While there's a lot of pieces that are part of that plan, a few are more specific to the heat relief network itself. The Arizona Department of Health Services is charged with examining the distribution of cooling centers and heat relief centers to make sure that there's successful allocation and management of resources for those centers. And they're also responsible for developing proposals to centralize and formalize coordination for cooling centers and heat relief facilities into a reliable network. And this is less in Maricopa County. We obviously have a pretty robust heat relief network, but there are other locations in the state that do not have as strong of a heat relief network. And so the state is also kind of responsible for looking at those spaces as well. So the state also heard that feedback from operators that coordination is desperately needed. So they're also hiring a heat relief coordinator at the state level. And so there has been and will continue to be close collaboration between Maricopa County Department of Public Health and the Arizona Department of Health Services as we move forward to keep building out the heat relief network at both the county and the state levels, respectively. So next slide, please. So following some feedback gathering with partners regarding the heat relief network coordination, a list of 10 areas were drafted with the intention that there would be action teams to help develop guidance to be implemented in each of these different areas. And so that includes the following. I'm just going to give a little description really briefly about those teams. The first is strategic planning. So kind of looking at the overall plan for the heat relief network and its coordination. The second is a data management team. So this includes some of the information that was mentioned by Reverend Katie and Cleo also, that kind of check-in data. So when visitors are visiting the cooling center, looking at the counts of individuals or visits that occurred, some of their demographics, some of their needs, understanding what can improve the program. And then that can also be used for program evaluation in the future. The third is cooling center intake and onboarding. And what is meant by this is what information is provided when someone applies to be a heat relief, to be listed as a heat relief partner on MAG's website. So we're working on, we've been asked, could there be some additional information that might be available to help individuals who are looking at that website? Number 4 is media. So looking at consistent messaging from the agencies and hopefully kind of having that upfront preseason information. So we keep media from coming into the spaces, you know, as they're trying to serve individuals during the heat season, and kind of having that messaging preseason and then throughout the season. The marketing action team is focused on how do we reach those populations that could benefit from the heat relief services and the heat relief centers that exist. So this could be printing of specific maps in different areas. Just how can we get the word out, do that outreach. And this will also be assessing the needs of each county as they're different. So that's more of the state's perspective rather than county perspective, but really important. Number 6 is training and education. So looking at how do we train staff and volunteers on different pieces like customer service, empathy, understanding stigma for some of the populations that are being served, and looking at substance use and harm reduction training. Number 7 is cooling center optimization. So again, looking at where are those centers located, where should they be located, and hopefully developing some guidance on how can we reach out to these spaces we've identified that may not traditionally be part of the heat relief network now, or how can we engage them to provide that space during the summers if it's being used for a different activity on different seasons. So hopefully looking at putting new centers in those under-resourced and underserved areas. Number 8 is supplies and logistics. So this is more of the developing a coordination infrastructure for water and the other supplies, moving those between each of those centers. Number 9 is very important, that funding action team. How can we find more funding opportunities to support all of the activities and expanding the heat relief network as we move forward? And transportation. So ensuring that people are aware of the options that exist and that they're using them, and then developing additional transportation as needed. And then, so I said 10 in the beginning. What we heard towards the end of the heat season was there was an identified need for site safety and security. So we've kind of added that as an 11th action team to address those needs moving forward. So what we're really looking for at the county level and at the state level is your expertise. If you're interested in serving on one of these action teams to help shape and standardize how the Heat Relief Network operates, please do reach out to me to indicate what you're interested in working on. We're hoping to launch some of these activities within the next few weeks, kind of as some places are still winding down their services because it's still warm. So we're looking to kind of keep that momentum going while we remember how warm it was this summer. And so please watch out for some invitations for those action team meetings moving forward. And Cleo, if you want to advance one more, this is my contact information. So if you're interested in serving on one of these teams, just reach out to me and I'll make sure that you're on that distribution list for those meetings in the future. And with that, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jessica. Really great to see all of those initiatives and actions coming together. Excited to see what it'll look like. All right. So some other topics that didn't get a full slide, but we could do entire presentations on them alone. These are things that we've heard repeatedly and talked about repeatedly throughout the season as a Heat Relief Network through the various meetings we hold on a monthly and weekly basis sometimes. Some of these are, and this has been talked about a number of times in the past, but what an extended season could look like. Where could, or really how could we build in flexibility to the network to know that you know, sometimes that April 15th to October 15th, or maybe even to October 30th, availability of heat relief is really needed. But we saw this year that we had a really cool spring until it hit a really intense summer. So that April 15th wasn't necessarily needed, but October 15th definitely was. So how do we build that flexibility into the network? And is it a realistic goal for us to have? Extended hours were brought up a lot this season as well. How do we shift the network from being not just sheltering people during the hottest and most dangerous part of the day, but also to evening and nighttime hours where heat relief is still needed? Dealing with increased volume as well. I'm sure Reverend Katie can talk about that a lot in terms of, you know, what it looks like when a lot of people need help and your site is the one that everyone is talking about and the volumes are really high. And what are the site safety precautions that need to be taken given this increased volume? That was something else that we talked a lot about this year that, you know, we don't have tons of answers for right now. And as always, communication with the public. How are we making sure that the people who most need these resources are the ones who are hearing about where to get them and actually being able to access them? And as we mentioned before, how do we continue developing this idea of intake forms? What do sites need so that this is something that they can actually do while they, you know, have a couple chairs set out for a cooling center, or maybe they're a library where people come in and scan a QR code and take an intake form. There are a lot of complexities to this because while we have many sites that are designated to be just heat relief, not every heat relief site is solely a heat relief site. So just things that we talked about a lot this season and that we continue to need input on. And a lot of these hopefully as well will be figured out in all of those work groups that Jessica highlighted as well. But they're topics we can talk about today if you all have ideas. And then any other feedback from you all. We really work hard to make this happen more efficiently with the limited resources that are available for heat relief. And we always want to know what can be improved. What did you see this season that was a big hiccup for you? What were things that you saw that went really well that we need to capitalize on? You are welcome to reach out to any of those emails on the screen, as well as we can open it up for discussion here today as well. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And want to open it up to the group. I know many of you are on the heat relief calls often, but I think there are some people in here who don't hit those monthly meetings that we all have. So hoping this provided some good context for you all, and we can ask questions to any of the presenters, any of the topics we covered, or really have this be an open space for what you experienced this season and how things can be improved.
Can I ask a question, Leo?
You may.
Okay, and I want to direct this back to Jessica with the county and just see if you have any understanding, not to put you on the spot, but I think one of the areas that's still a little gray for us at MAG with the governor's executive order is responsibilities moving forward and who they want to do what, whether it's state, county, or community partners and stakeholders, many of whom are on this call. Is that all still being decided, or is there any more decision or any decisions been made?
I am probably not the best source of that information, but as I said, kind of that collaboration and determining some of that information, we're working closely with ADHS as it relates to the heat relief network itself. In regards to the other components of that, I'm not sure I know the status, because there are several, and it's mostly at the state level in terms of who is charged with doing that work, and hopefully that information, gets reviewed, and we offer suggestions as organizations from county level to city level who have experience in that are sharing their expertise. So I don't know if there's someone better to answer your question about any of those responsibilities moving forward. That's what we have from our perspective.
Thank you.
Maylee.
I do not have an answer to that question. I did want to ask 2 questions, so I don't know if anybody was going to respond to that before I start going.
I think we're good. Go ahead, Maylee.
Oh wait, Melissa.
Yeah, I think that just to add on to what Jessica was saying, a lot of the future action really depends upon the state health department and its attention, because in Maricopa County, we are pretty far ahead in terms of cooling center network development. But this is a state emergency order, so that the state needs to be in the driver's seat for that. And right now they're trying to put together a heat summit. And I'm not sure if anybody is on this call from that group, that would just really flesh out what the needs are a little bit more, and some of these working groups and whatnot. So I know that they're trying to get that done by mid-November or so. So we'll know better after that point.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Xinyi from ADHS. So I think right now we have as Melissa mentioned, so we try to have the heat summit, but I think at this point the heat summit is scheduled for October 30th, and then we are preparing our invitation list, and then the invite should be sent out to all the partners soon, and then we want to get inputs from the nonprofit, local, and academia, like all different partners, to hear what they want to say, and then we will receive those information and do further analysis, and then to form different work group based on the suggestions. And because there's some areas we still don't really know. For example, the optimization, I think the governor assigned the task to ASU as well. So we just try to identify how we can collaborate with all the different partners and to come up with a good solution and action plan. I hope that answers some of your questions.
Thank you. It does.
Awesome. So I have 2 questions, more so for like the logistical side of the program. Because the way that our city currently does it is I'm kind of in charge of filling out the MAG forms for each of our distribution centers. And so those centers report the numbers back to me. But for water bottle distributions, how do you all track that? Because I'm trying to find the most efficient way to do it. And I don't really know because, you know, people are at the front desk, like they get, you know, busy doing other stuff at the same time. So I don't know if anybody has a good system.
If you are someone who helps run a heat relief site that hands out water, please feel free to speak up here.
We so we have our folks, whoever's like handing out that water for, and we're a little different because we're, you know, specifically running centers that are dedicated to heat. But we just track by cases. And so every day, like when they're opening, they kind of like, we have a piece of paper by the water that they kind of tick on as they're opening that. And then every week we ask folks to email it to our one contact for like the bulk keeping. I'm not saying it's perfect, but that's how it's working right now. I imagine it's a lot harder, like you're saying, in libraries and places like that.
Yeah, that's the issue I'm running into. I think that counting the cases though would probably be easier on both of us. And I thought I wrote down the second question and I did not. So never mind. I don't remember what it was.
No worries. Anyone else have questions about anything that you heard today, or maybe a topic you didn't hear that you would like to discuss?
So I do have a quick question. Obviously, we're doing planning throughout the year. My question is, it seemed like some of the funding requests came out pretty late in the season last year. Do we know from a municipal standpoint how soon grants will be issued for next heat relief season for us to also start planning internally for applying for funding to open up centers for next summer?
Got a couple people from the municipal side on this call, so if any of you feel brave enough to step up to that question, please feel free to.
Hey, Cleo, from City of Phoenix side, yeah, we didn't love the timeline there either. We're trying to catch up with evolving federal rules on the particular pool of resources that money was coming from. So we are aware of that concern and working hard this fall to be sure we can do something on a better timeline this year and figuring out what that funding source will look like. Some of which is also going to depend on the county-state conversation, but feedback absolutely heard, and we'll do the best we can to be sure it's not a June launch next year.
Thank you.
Jessica? Yeah.
Thanks, guys. I just had two things that came up this year that I just want to bring up for consideration, and that's, I see one of the other topics listed is heat relief site safety, and so I just wanted to expand that even a little bit past just the site itself. We received a lot of input from our police department for just a heavily increased calls around some of our heat relief centers. As well as our encampment operations team was experiencing many encampments that were forming in alleys and places that were around our heat relief centers. And so I just wanted to have that as a part of the conversation as to how we can best navigate that in the future. One other thing that came up this year that I don't know that we have addressed in the past is in our city in Tempe, we have several of our community centers listed as heat relief centers. Not necessarily our library, but several community centers. And we did have some folks that were going to community centers that were heat relief centers that also had Head Start students coming out identify themselves as registered sex offenders. And so without that question necessarily on the interview questions or just what we're asking, is there any ways that folks have navigated that in the past? Because this is the first year it's come up for us so clearly at times. So just putting both of those things out there as points of discussion.
Reverend Katie, do you have is your response directly related to this?
Not so much a response, but just addition to the statements. We had numerous incidents where we called the police and no one came out repeatedly. I mean, numerous times. And so I know that for us, it became a safety issue for our staff pretty significantly. I really want to arrange a meeting with the higher ups in the police departments before the next season. And ideally, it wouldn't just be AFN at that meeting. I think there needs to be a conversation around this because just frankly, I was baffled by the way that our employee and staff was treated. And I'm growingly concerned about the fact that we had folks actively committing crimes and police did not come out to protect folks.
Reverend Sexton, would Dave Hundula with City of Phoenix says that he would also like to be a part of that conversation. I know we at MAG got some carryover this year from a security issue at one of the sites, and so I'm sure we would be more than happy to listen in as well.
I think that this also needs to go back to criteria for cooling centers, and we don't really have any set criteria right now. We have just guidance. And I know that when we were trying to suss out other additional cooling center locations with the Arizona Faith Network, one of the considerations was to make sure that there was definite walls between children, whether that's Head Start or a nursery school or a summer camp or something like that. So that we don't have these kind of issues, whether they happen inadvertently or not. So with the case in a library, that's a little difficult, but in a community center, maybe there's a room to the right as soon as you come in so that you would have that separation and you would never have these issues come to the forefront.
Yeah, and then as Dave mentioned in the chat, maybe starting up this security action team a little earlier rather than later so we can figure out all of these extremely complex challenges that are faced by heat relief sites. Anything else in the group, either related to this or another topic? All right, I've got a question. Were you an intake site that, or a heat relief site that did any of those intake questionnaires? I know that AFN really did this in a big way, and this was brand new this year. So I believe Salvation Army maybe also was able to employ the intake questionnaire as well. Just want to see if you were a site that was able to do that, if there were any challenges that you were faced by it, or maybe you were a cooling site that was not able to do it because staff capacity, or you didn't know how to get it off the ground, or it wasn't feasible or practical for your site. Is there anyone on the call who dealt with that this summer?
Yes, so I'll respond to that from the Salvation Army side. For some of our locations that were larger manned, we were able to get good success with doing the intakes. For some of ours that were just doing water pass out or were smaller locations, it was difficult to be able to have staff time to be able to answer the questions. And many of the participants just wanted the water or be able to relax without answering questions. So it was a hit or miss.
Can jump in a little bit too. And Nadia, I saw you unmute, so I'll get to you in just a second. And I do have to jump because I have a meeting starting right now, but I found it very helpful overall. You do need a dedicated person, so having staff is going to be critical to do it, but it really it helped us understand who we were seeing, why we were seeing people, like how they were getting there. And it allowed us to adjust the resources as much as we could within the emergency chaos of this season, to meet the needs of the community better. So we're going to continue with it, and I'm sure there will be better questions we can ask every year.
Sorry, I can speak a little bit to like employing the questions and stuff. I was in one of the centers, and I think overall it was like really pretty straightforward. There were definitely a couple challenges that came up along the way. One of them was physically using the Google form. It didn't translate very well to a mobile application or like onto the mobile device. So most of it, I ended up just bringing in my laptop because it was easier. But doing it on the phone was like logistic. Like I realized it's kind of a small thing, but it just really slowed things down. Most people were totally fine with answering the questions. And we also, at the location that I was in, we had pretty much the same kind of group of people coming in from day to day. So many of their answers weren't changing, right? Like how old are they? Some of those questions. And so it got to, especially after they'd come in for a couple days, it was a really quick intake process because, I recognized them. I knew kind of, what area they stayed in, those types of things. So yeah, I did. Towards the end, it was a little bit long. And so some people would get a little bit of, I guess, a degree of like questionnaire fatigue. Sometimes, especially when we got to our very last question was like, is there any place that you go when you're not here? And at that point, most people would just say like anywhere with shade, and then be like kind of interested in not being, not doing this questionnaire anymore. So.
Thanks everyone for that input. Also just want to let the group know that we have this space until 11:30. Welcome to hop off or stay for as long as we'd like to discuss things up until that point. Anything else from the presentation that people would like to bring up today? Or just have space to air when it comes to running a heat relief network? Okay. Well then, we can wrap up today. I really appreciate you all coming and joining us for this time and for all of the information and insights that you shared. As always, you can reach out to myself, Kelly, or our hsinfo@azmag.gov if you have any additional input or things that you would like to add. And Jessica provided her information as well for all of this forward moving action that we will be taking in our off season. So I think that's all for us today. Thank you everyone for joining us.